Okay, so this is test version C, scenario 1. Texas A&M School of Agriculture is conducting an experiment to compare the impact of sunlight on the growth rate of two varieties of dwarf trees in a greenhouse. The greenhouse has 12 window box planters with adequate size for multiple trees. 12 dwarf trees, 12 dwarf apple trees, and 12 dwarf plum trees are available for the experiment. The floor plan of the greenhouse is shown below. The greenhouse is situated in a field that has no barriers to sunlight, so that the east side receives direct morning sun and the west side receives direct afternoon and evening sun. And by the way, really important, they're comparing the impact of sunlight on the growth rate. So basically, please note that our treatments in this case is sunlight, and our subjects are the trees themselves, all right? We have two different types of trees, the dwarf apple and the dwarf plum. So our setup is as shown, and the east side receives direct morning, the west side direct direct evening sun, or I should say late afternoon and evening sun. And then the north and south are not receiving direct sun. Inside the greenhouse, each window box planter is equipped with a photometer, a device that measures the intensity of light reaching the trees in the window planter. And that makes sense given that our treatment in this case that we're trying to figure out is how light impacts the trees. So describe how you would assign the dwarf trees to the window planters for a completely randomized design. Whenever you have a completely randomized design, that means every possible combination can occur, and you need a single hat. In this case, I have 12 dwarf apple trees and 12 dwarf plum trees. So I would just number those trees from 1 to 24 because I have two sets. All right. Then I would go stand by. So I number the trees 1 to 24. I put 24 slips of paper, the number 1 to 24 in a hat, and I'd mix. At window box 1, I would draw two numbers. The two numbers drawn would be assigned to window box. The trees associated with the two numbers drawn would be assigned to window box 1. Without replacement, I'd go to window box 2 and draw the next two numbers. The trees associated with those would be assigned to window box 2, and I would continue around the room until every single window box had two trees. Notice it would be possible for a window box to have 2 plum. It'd be possible to have 2 apple in a window box, or it'd be possible to have an apple and a plum in each one. But the key here is I numbered 1 to 24, and every possible combination could happen. If I were to make a randomized block design, what variable would I block on and why? Well, we know that my treatments are the light, so I can't block on that. But there very well could be a difference in the tree type and the way that they grow. Because maybe the plum does better with one type of light, and the apple tree does better with a different type. So I would block by tree type, because I believe tree type would have the greatest impact on the study, and the treatment was light, so I can't block on the treatment. I have to block on something besides that. So in this case, I would block based on the tree type. Based on the blocking variable you chose in part B, describe how you would group the window box planters into blocks. Clearly indicate your blocks for those numbers. So in other words, I need to make sure that I'm going to, so I've blocked them, and so now how am I going to group these window box planters? Well, they've told me that there's a difference in light in the morning, in the afternoon. So what I would do is I'd have 2, 3, 4, and 5 in one block. And by the way, there's multiple ways to do this, but 2, 3, 4, and 5 in one block, because those are my direct sunlight. And then I'd block 11, 10, 9, and 8 in the other block. That would have my afternoon light. Now, you can either put 1, 12, 6, and 7 together as a block, or you could actually separate them and have 1 and 12 and 6 and 7 because you're thinking there could be a difference in light from north side to south side, or like I said, you could group them as a separate block, and that would be fine. Again, there were multiple ways to block that, but for me, because we know that there's different treatments, I would say treatment group would be 2, 3, 4, and 5. 11, 10, 9, and 8 would be the second one. And then I would group 1 and 12 and 6 and 7 together as the next group. For randomized block design in Part C, why are the dwarf trees randomly assigned to the blocks? We always randomize in order to equalize the effects of uncontrolled variables. Some trees may be healthier than other trees, so because we don't know that, we need to make sure that we equalize the conditions. Quite frankly, some window boxes may have different special things about it. Maybe they're too close to the door. Maybe the window doesn't work as well. There's a long list, or maybe the soil in the window box isn't quite the same as the others. So basically, we have to make random assignment to the window boxes to equalize for differences, because some areas are going to be more preferred than others when we don't know what it is, and we don't want to bias a study by self-selecting. Part D, design and carry out a matched pair design for the study. Remember, in a matched pair design, you want to make sure that every single every single group is tested twice. All right, so in this case, I would go, you know what? The way to do that is to make sure that each window box has one of each type of tree. So to make sure that window box 1 has an apple and a plum. Window box 2, an apple and a plum. So what I would do in order to do that is, and you still have to have randomization. In this particular case, I would put the apple trees 1 to 12. I'd put 12 slips of paper in a hat and mix and draw. Standing by window box 1, the number drawn would go to that window box. I go to the window box 2 and draw an apple tree number. The tree associated with that number would go to window box 2, and I'd go around to that all the apple trees were assigned. I would do the same thing with the plum trees. I'd number the plum trees 1 to 12. I'd have 12 slips of paper that were numbered in a hat and mix. I'd go to window box 1 and draw. The plum tree associated with the number would go into window box 1. Therefore, I have at window box 1 a plum tree and an apple tree, and I would do this all the way around. Once I've done that, after a specific amount of time, I'd go back and I would measure the amount of growth that each tree had. All right, because we're looking for it, because that growth is our response variable in this particular instance. Beard length is this is scenario 2 for test C. Beard length is a sign of attractiveness among leprechauns. Unfortunately, many environmental factors have reduced beard length, the average beard length over time. There have been many studies that link decreased beard length among leprechauns to eating Lucky Charms cereal, their primary food source. While it is known that several magical components in Lucky Charms can inhibit beard growth among leprechauns, it is thought that increasing the percentage of pink hearts in the cereal may result in longer beard lengths. So in this particular case, we know we have a problem with beard lengths getting smaller among leprechauns, and we think Lucky Charms is inhibiting it. But if we increase the percentage of pink hearts, maybe that will help solve the problem. The effect of adding more pink hearts to the cereal on beard length will be studied over a 3-year period using 150 leprechauns who are non-smokers and who each eat 3 bowls of Lucky Charms a day, with 1 bowl being at breakfast, 1 at lunch, and 1 at dinner. Each of these 150 participants will be assigned to one of 2 groups. The experimental group will eat the Lucky Charms, which contains a 20% increase in the number of pink hearts, or the control group who eat the Lucky Charms with the standard proportion of pink hearts. Each leprechaun's beard will be measured at the beginning and at the end of the study. Describe an appropriate method for assigning the leprechauns to the 2 groups so that each group will have an equal number of subjects. Basically, I could put the names of 150 leprechauns in a hat and mix. Because I'm running a completely randomized design, I only need one hat. I can either number them 1 to 150, or I can put the names in a hat and mix. So I'm going to put the names in a hat and mix. The first 75 names drawn will go to the control group. Those are eating regular Lucky Charms, and the other will go to the experimental group that has the increase in pink hearts, the 20% increase of pink hearts. In this study, research chose to include a group who only ate Lucky Charms that had standard proportion of pink hearts as their control group. Why is it important to include this control group in the study, even though beard lengths will be measured at the beginning and at the end of the study? Okay, the control group provides a baseline, and almost everyone told me that, but that's not adequate. The control group provides a baseline so that we will know that the changes being observed are due to the treatments, which in this case is the increase in pink hearts, or due to some outside environmental factor. All right, so are the changes we're observing in beard length, or is it due to an outside factor, or due to the treatment group? And by having a control group, we have a baseline to know if that's happening. You have to be very specific about that. Why would the researchers choose to use only non-smokers in the study? It is possible that smoking is a confounding variable, that it might impact beard length. And because smoking might impact beard length or other health things that impact the study, we are going to eliminate, we're going to control for that amount of variation. So we're controlling for variation by limiting non-smokers because it could prove to be a confounding variable in the study and actually impact beard length. It's important that you say that it's could be a confounding variable or changes the variation, because we believe it might impact what we're studying, which was in this case beard length. Okay, so this is test C, version C, scenario 3, an anatomy class made up of 28 pre-med students and 20 business students is about to study human anatomy. Well, that makes sense. They're in an anatomy class. Before beginning the unit, the professor gives each of the 48 students in the class a pretest to assess their knowledge of human anatomy. The professor wants to compare the effectiveness of an instructional program in which students physically perform a human dissection with the effectiveness of a different performance in which the students use computer software that only simulates the dissection. After completing one of the two programs, students will be given a post-test to assess their knowledge of human anatomy. The professor will then analyze the changes in the scores, which is post-test score minus the score on the pretest. Describe a method for assigning a completely randomized design of 48 students to two groups of equal size that allows for statistically valid comparison of the two instructional programs. Okay, so in this case, this is a completely randomized design. We have a completely randomized design. We are not breaking them down based on any characteristic. We are combining them all together into one hat and mixing. So I'm going to take the 28 pre-med students and the 20 business students. I'm going to put all their names in a hat. So that's 48 names in a hat. I'm going to mix those 48 names around and draw. The first 24 names drawn will go to the physical dissection. The remaining 24 names will go to the computerized dissection. They go through the program. The first 24 we measure how they performed on a pretest. They go through the program. After they've gone through the program, we measure how they do on the post-test. The 24 that went to the virtual, the very first thing they do is they take a pretest. They go through the virtual program. Then they measure how they did on a post-test. At the end of the time, we compare results to determine whether or not the students had a greater increase in test score, whether it be with physical dissection versus the virtual program. If a randomized block were to be utilized, what variable would you block on? Justify your response. We always block on the variable that we believe will have the greatest impact on the study. Because we have two different types of students, pre-med students and business students, and we're looking at an anatomy class, I think it would be reasonable to block on the type of student. So I'd have 28 pre-med students in one group and 20 business students in the other group. And those would be my blocks. My blocks are not of equal size, and that's okay. I have a 28 in one and 20 in the other, and that's probably equal enough. The main thing is block on the variable that you think will have the greatest impact. And I think the pre-med students are going to perform differently than the business students. So I want to block on that characteristic of what they're studying. Suppose the professor decided to allow the students in the class to select which instructional program on frog anatomy they prefer to take, and 26 chose actual dissection and 22 chose computer simulation. How might that self-selection jeopardize a statistically valid comparison? All right, so provide a specific example to support your response. So this is saying, how could it happen? Why is it a problem? And then the other thing is create an example, and it just needs to be reasonable. So when I look at this and I go, you know what, I'm going to bet that the pre-med students as a whole are going to be more interested in doing a physical dissection than the business students. I don't know that, but so my concern here is that I would overrepresent one group. I very likely to overrepresent the pre-med in the physical dissection and overrepresent the business in the computer simulation. As such, I don't have fair representation across the groups, and in this case, I believe that there's going to be a difference. I'm going to believe that the pre-med students are going to be better at dissection, so consequently, their scores are going to have a different rate of change than the business students. So consequently, that does not equalize, because if I allow them to choose, I didn't randomize, I'm introducing a confounding factor, which happens to be personal preference. And I personally believe that in this specific instance, the pre-med students are going to choose a different type of dissection than the business students. And I believe the pre-med students are going to perform differently and I would suspect better. So consequently, my personal belief is you're going to find that the results are confounded by their choice, because it's very likely the pre-med students will perform on dissection, the physical dissection, and they're going to have the better scores versus the business students who choose the computer simulation and might have lower scores. So I might rule out the computer simulation when I shouldn't have, just because I did not have adequate pre-med students using the computer simulation. It's also, people will think, hey, one's gross and the other's not, and that might impact the way they perform. And typically speaking, someone who thinks dissection is gross is probably not going to perform as well as those who like dissection. So some sort of reasoning like this, a wide variety is possible, but the main thing is randomization is necessary to prevent confounding, to equalize the effects, to prevent confounding by equalizing the effects of outside variables that we're not controlled for.